Life and Adventures of Jack Engle, an Autobiography, in which the reader will find some familiar characters. By Walt Whitman. Read by Frank Blissett. Chapter 3. At this time I have only a confused and occasionally distinct recollection of my fortunes previous to the morning at the milkman's. You have doubtless, supposing you to have lived in or ever visited New York, seen there many a little vagabond in dirty tatters and shirtless. They generally wander along in men's boots picked up somewhere, whose disproportionate size makes it necessary for them to keep their feet sliding along without lifting from the ground. The shuffling movement thus acquired sometimes sticks to them through life. Nobody either cares or appears to care for these juvenile loafers. Some are the children of shame, and are cast out because they would be a perpetual memento of disgrace to their generators. Some are orphans of the poorest classes. Others run away from parental brutality, which is pretty plentiful, after all, among both high and low. Others again take to the streets for very sustenance, those who should naturally be their protectors living lives of drunkenness and improvidence. The revelations of the reports of the chief of the police about this extensive element in what is termed the rising generation are terrible and romantic in their naked facts, far beyond any romance of the novelist. What I remember of my life previous to my introduction in the second chapter was mostly located among this class. We were indeed wanderers upon the face of the earth, although our travels did not extend beyond the limits of the city and the places within a few miles' distance. The only principle that controlled us was the instinct to live animally, to eat, if we could get it, when we were hungry, and to lie down and sleep whenever weariness overtook us. I have a very clear recollection of a most intimate crony, with whom I shared luck and adventures, and who did the same with me. He was a little older than myself. His name, he always said, was William or Bill Jiggs, but we all used to call him Bill Jiggs for convenience. Bill Jiggs was quite a magnificent fellow. When elated or very good-humored indeed, he was wont to announce himself as one of the boys you read of in the Scriptures, though which of these numerous worthies he meant he never specified. He had red hair, very red. It was never combed, but it was cut every few days by the friend who happened to be the handiest, sometimes with a scissors, sometimes with a jackknife sharpened for the work, and once, I remember, with a broadaxe. I had the honor of handling the implement myself on that occasion. Some carpenters at work on a new house had gone to dinner nearby and left their tools lying loose around. Poor Bill Jiggs! I came very near laying his head open. My friend would never allow me to be imposed upon by superior force or cunning, and though I was too little to add much to his weight in his own quarrels, still I sometimes managed to cast the balance in his favor, in cases where the odds were pretty nearly even. For Bill-Jiggs was pugnacious. He entered into quarrels and fights on the smallest pretense, and sometimes received horrible drubbings. One day, I remember, he pitched into a boy considerably bigger than himself for some curt rejoinder to a critical remark of Bill-Jiggs about a certain spotted cap which the aforesaid boy chose to wear on his head. He of the spotted cap got considerably the worst of the battle, which waxed hot, when he was fain to seize a good-sized paving-stone that happened to be loose in the street, and dealt Bill-Jiggs such a blow on the side of his head that he fell flat and senseless on the ground, and the blood poured forth freely, the victor taking to his heels like a good fellow. I mention this incident because it was the means of my first seeing an individual who years afterward, as the reader will find in the course of the story, played a prominent part in the affairs of my life. Bill-Jiggs was carried in the nearest basement, and restoratives applied to him. An old Quaker lady and a little girl of my own age appeared to be the only ones at home. The old lady was very kind in her manner, and after washing Bill-Jiggs' dirty and bloody head and applying plasters from the neighboring druggist's, bound it up in her own large, clean, white linen handkerchief. The little girl had to fasten the knot in it, for the old lady's fingers were not nimble enough. She did so very tenderly and neatly, and she seemed to me, as I looked at her, to be a little red-cheeked angel from heaven. Bill-Jiggs afterwards kept the handkerchief, and couldn't be induced to part with it any way. He took it with him to Mexico several years afterward, where the poor fellow met with an uglier wound than that of the paving-stone, and no old Quaker lady to look after him. A wound which sent him to a grave among the prickly cactuses. Such was the end of Bill-Jiggs, than whom there are many worse young men, who dress in clean shirts, with straight high collars, and go to church of a Sunday. This little girl, the old lady called her Martha, spoke so pleasantly to me, too, and the old lady, when we went away, told me to come there from time to time and get what she had to bestow, either of food or clothing. I don't know how it was, but neither I nor my friend ever stepped foot in that basement afterward, even when we were the hungriest. For the first time almost in our lives, we had been treated with rational benevolence, and as if we were real human beings. I know, in my case, it touched me with a feeling I never remembered before. Although I would have died for the old lady or the child, I felt something like pride toward them, or perhaps for their good opinion. My impression is, to this day, that the little episode I have just described, that gentle old face surrounded with the plain lace edging of its cap, and the silver hair so smoothly folded, and that other face, emblem of purity and infantile goodness, and the glimpse that came upon me of a happy, peaceful, honest, well-ordered life. My belief is, I say, that all this acted with the influence of a good genius upon me afterward. Child as I was, how far more deeply children think than most people imagine, I saw something of the moral of the difference between the meanness and poverty and degradation of my class, and the delicacy and wholesomeness and safety of that Quaker family. I knew that I was of the same flesh and blood, and the same nature, as they. I was encouraged, and how much more benefited by their really respectful kindness than they dreamed of. And here is a consideration that the theorist on the evils of society might build a big structure upon. But as I am only jotting down a story of incidents, I will leave whoever sees these paragraphs to carry out the train of thought for himself. That was Chapter 3 of Life and Adventures of Jack Engle, an Autobiography, in which the reader will find some familiar characters, by Walt Whitman. Read by Frank Blissett.